Welcome again, bright young students. Today we are going to learn about multi-step factoring. So this is going to be extremely simple. Let me set down my mic. And I'm a bit under the weather, so that's why I sound a little stuffy. But this is going to be very similar to what we've done before, except what do you know? There are a few steps before that we have to take before we factor. That's why it's called multi-step factoring. So we still want to keep in mind what if A is 1, what if A is not 1, and the different ways to factor those trinomials. We want to do the same thing here, except maybe we have to do some steps before we factor. So let's take a look at an example. So as you can see here, the numbers are a lot bigger. So let's see, is there anything that we can factor out to make it nicer? Do the numbers have anything in common? Do the variables have anything in common? In this case, the numbers do, but the variables don't. So we see, what do 54, 294, and 120 have in common? What's the biggest thing they have in common? In this case, it's 6. So we factor out a 6. So if you would have done something else like 2, like they all have 2 in common, then you would have seen that that trinomial that I just underlined would have had to be factored again. So you could either start from the beginning or just factor out that trinomial one more time. So you want to pull out the biggest thing. So then I think, do 9 and 49 and 20 have anything in common? No, they don't. So here, the part that I just underlined, I can see that that's a trinomial. It's much simpler than before, but the numbers are still a little bit bigger, but that's okay. We know how to handle it. And we just factor. A is not 1, so I hope that we would go straight into thinking this is the AC method. So let's multiply 9 times a positive 20. Gives us 180. Now 180 is a big number, but that's okay. We know how to do it. So just start factoring. So if you're not very good at factoring, punch in your calculator. 180 divided by 1 gives you 180. 180 divided by 2 gives you 90. 180 divided by 3 gives me 60. 180 divided by 4 gives me 45. And look, we don't even have to go that far because I can see right now that 4 and 45 of some sort, if they were both negative, would give me a negative 49, so we really don't have to factor too much. From here, it's just the same. So let's bring down that 6. We haven't used it. We've actually already factored it out. I am going to start using brackets now instead of parentheses because we're going to be using multiple pairs of parentheses, so this just helps us keep what parentheses are straight. So same thing, we take negative 4 and negative 45 and rewrite that middle term. So we bring down 9x squared. We didn't do anything with it. Let's rewrite negative 49 to be negative 4x minus negative 45, or minus 45x, and then plus 20. So once again, I've got 4 terms. So I hope our brains would go to thinking, let's factor by grouping. So bring down the 6. Now this is when the brackets come in handy. We look at those first 2 terms, 9x squared minus 4x. What do they have in common? Nothing with the numbers, but they have a variable in common. So we factor that out. And then we look at negative 45x and a positive 20. Do the numbers have anything in common? Yes, they do. What's the biggest thing, or more importantly, what's going to give us that 9x minus 4? And it's if we factor out a negative 5, and then we get 9x minus 4, which is good because those two things match up. From here, it's the same thing. Let's just bring down that 6. They both have 9x minus 4 in common, so we factor that out. And what's left over? X minus 5. And then just to make it a little bit neater, we really don't need those brackets there. So let's just bring those down. And that's our final answer. So if you wanted to double check yourself, that trinomial in the beginning, what is it in simplest form after we factored everything absolutely completely gives us this right here. And if we wanted to check ourselves, we could just multiply 6 times 9x minus 4. That would give us something. Then multiply that something by x minus 5. And after we've multiplied it all out, we should see that we get that trinomial up at the beginning. So there's how we do it. We see if we can make it any simpler in the beginning by factoring something out, and then everything else is just the same. Let's take a look at another example. So I hope in our heads, well, first of all, our directions are factor completely. And this one's a little bit unusual because we have a trinomial, we have 3 terms, but they all have variables in them, and their highest degree is 3. We haven't had anything like that when we've just had a trinomial. We've had it when we've had a 4 terms. I don't know what that's called, but we've had it before. So this we see, do the numbers have anything in common? 2, 10, and 48. What's the greatest thing? A 2. Do the variables have anything in common? Yes, the greatest thing is an x. So we factor out a 2x and see what we are left with. And here, that trinomial that we are left with, the coefficient in front of x squared is a, so it's much simpler. So all we have to do is figure out what are those factors of negative 24 that are going to give us a positive 5. So we can go straight into the factoring. We don't have to do factor by grouping because a is 1. So we bring down that 2x, we go straight into the parentheses. What times what gives us a negative 24, and when we add those terms, we get a positive 5. That is x plus 8 and x minus 3. There is our answer. That is that term completely factored. So now I've got some U-tries for you. So now would be a great time to pause the video, write those down, work those out yourself, and then press play and check your answers with mine. So I'm going to work my work on the board right now. And there we have it. Now we know how to do multi-step factoring.